So my story begins with really a love affair. My husband and I were blessed with a very loving relationship. We were married for 40 years and we had a wonderful time together. We were best friends as well as life partners. And we had the very good fortune of being able to travel quite a bit throughout our life together. And when we had the opportunity, we would go to Europe. And we loved music and opera and art and walking old cities in Europe. And one of those trips was a trip to Vienna and to Dresden in Germany. And my husband was older than I, and so we really made the most of all of our time together. We celebrated everything and we had a wonderful, wonderful time together despite the normal ups and downs that everybody has in their life. So we went to Vienna and Dresden, and it was a perfect trip. This was in 2016. Everything went well. We didn't have any of the usual travel snafus that can happen. Neither one of us even got a cold. Everything went smoothly. It was really a perfect trip. And when we came home, my husband started coughing, and I thought maybe he'd picked up a bug on the plane. So of course we had it looked into and it wouldn't go away. And towards the end of 2016, we found out that he had lung cancer. But okay, we had been through prostate cancer before, so we thought, okay, we know how to do this. We'll just put one foot in front of the other, and we're very grateful for all of the wonderful care we were about to receive and which he did receive. And it looked as though it was early stages, so we were able to begin a course of chemotherapy and some other treatment, which again we were enormously grateful for. And as we went along, it looked as though things were going well. Fred is his name, went into remission, and we were able to have a wonderful few months of being outside and walking our dogs and enjoying good food and wine, even though his appetite really started to shift quite a bit. But then as time went on, we learned that it actually wasn't as early as they had thought, that it was actually, we went from stage 1 or 2 to stage 4. And I remember when we got that news, I just yelled out, "But that's palliative. Stage 4 is palliative." And they said, "Yeah, it is." And so it really did feel then that the rug had been pulled out from under us. But again, Fred was a very strong person and very positive. And so we said, okay, we'll do whatever we need to do. And so we went back into chemo and some immunotherapy and other treatments, and again, had exemplary care all along. And the summer came of 2017, and Fred was able to be outside a lot, sitting on our front porch, and I was working full time. He was retired. And he'd been through quite a bit. I would take time off and sit with him when he had his chemotherapy, hold his hand and just chat with him and keep him company. But it got to the point where he was needing 24-hour-a-day oxygen. All the tanks were being delivered and lined up on our front porch and taken away, and new ones brought in, and long tubing and machinery, and he started to lose strength and appetite, and breathing became more difficult despite the oxygen. And one day when I came home from work, it was in early fall of 2017 or late summer, he said, "I'm going to call the oncologist and say it's time to stop." And I looked at him and we both knew what that meant, but I so respected that decision because he really knew that this wasn't the life for him. He was an older man and he didn't want to live like this. And so when we went back to the oncologist, she said to us both in September, "It has progressed and you have a few months left to live." I was shocked. I had hoped for another year, don't we always? But Fred was so gracious. He looked at her and he said, "That must have been so hard for you to tell me that." And I remember in that moment thinking, how do you have the grace to say that when my heart is in a million pieces. But I fell in love with him all over again right then and there, because I thought, that is the man that I married and that I love, who has the ability to step outside his own personal tragedy and say, I'm thinking about you right now, not me. What a wonderful man. So we came home and we started basically palliative care at home. And I've worked in healthcare all my career, and so I knew never to make a promise to him that I couldn't keep, which is, I will care for you at home until your last breath. I knew enough from the clients and patients that I had worked with in healthcare that that's just not always possible. We had wonderful care at home, but it did get to the point where he was getting delirious. I was very afraid he was going to fall and break a hip or something. And we weren't sleeping. I was up with him all night, just trying to make sure he didn't fall out of bed, and all those sorts of things. We were getting a hospital bed delivered and all of that. And when we had a particularly bad night, I called the palliative care nurse first thing in the morning, and I said, I need some help because he's restless, he's delirious. So the long story short was, when the nurse came at about 7 that morning, he said, I think it's time to look at palliative care in a hospice. And as it turned out, we got a room that day. I mean, it was quite unprecedented. So we went in the ambulance with a dear friend who drove in her car ahead of us, which was a lifesaver for me, because when we got to the hospice, I was able to stay with Fred, and she was able to go to the business office and, double check about, insurance and all those sorts of things and logistics. And I had someone to come home with at the end of the day. But I left Fred there, and he died the next morning. So he was in hospice less than a day. I know a lot of people wonder about being with someone when they die. I've come to believe that people choose their time. And Fred knew I was coming to see him and spend the day with him. The nurses told him, and he died as soon as they left the room. I'm quite certain he just didn't want me to be there when he died. So an incredible journey then has started for me in terms of living without him after 40 years. I've spent most of my adult life with him. But what I did was I threw myself into the care of my two very frail and elderly parents, who both lived in the same house that I had grown up in and that they had lived in for over 60 years. And I thought, okay, if I can't be a wife and a best friend to Fred, I can be the best daughter going. And this was now, he died in October 2017, and both of my parents died before the end of 2018. So I went through the journey of supporting first my mother going into hospital, coming home for home palliative care, and then going back into palliative care in hospital for about a month. And then my elderly father being alone in the house, very frail, and needing to eventually move into a retirement residence where he only lived for 3 weeks after he moved in. So my husband died and my parents died within a year, and that really challenged everything that I thought about who I was: a wife, a partner, a friend, a daughter. And I've learned quite a lot about how those things actually don't stop. You don't stop being a wife or a daughter. You're always a wife and a daughter, because those relationships are what make you who you are. They've made me who I am to a large extent. And so that's always going to be part of who I am. I used to say, I'm an orphan now, or I'm so alone. And I don't anymore. I really say, I am a wife, I am a daughter, I always will be, because that love never goes away. And so I will always be grateful that I had those relationships and those people in my life. And they're always going to be with me, because now they're part of who I am.